hundreds of children trapped. The terrorist known as the Butcher set the demolition timer. Rescue forces were stalled by rigid doctrine and bureaucracy. Everyone assumed it was the end, but they missed one detail. The scorned Marine, Gunnery Sergeant Avery Keller. With her German Shepherd Kilo, she went rogue, infiltrating through a forgotten storm drain. When the rulebook said, "Stand down," she replied with master-level EOD skill and absolute courage. They put everything on the line. The result? An impossible story with zero casualties. Tell us, where are you watching from? If you love stories of courage and triumph, be sure to subscribe to the channel. The mid-morning air over North Point, California, was unusually clear, carrying the crisp scent of pine and coastal sagebrush, a deceptive serenity that often draped the military installations nestled in the valleys. It was late spring, the kind of season where the sun promised warmth, but the shade still held a chill. Inside the drab, echoing warehouse of the logistics detachment at the Marine Corps base, the mood was anything but serene. Gunnery Sergeant Avery Keller sat at a metal table stacked high with obsolete radio transceivers and faded instruction manuals. At 31, Avery was tall, athletic, and moved with the economical precision of someone who understood physics and leverage. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her expression was habitually set to a state of controlled stillness, a quiet strength that often masked her sharp, analytical mind. Despite wearing the standard utility uniform, the gold star stitched subtly above her service ribbon, and the EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, pin on her chest, told a story of combat heroism and technical mastery that her current assignment utterly failed to reflect. Avery had transferred from a highly decorated Special Operations Support unit, but the prevailing sentiment among the male-dominated command was that she was too complex, too emotional, and better suited for paperwork than for CQB, close quarters battle. She felt a dull, familiar burn of frustration. Lying patiently at her feet was Kilo, her 6-year-old German Shepherd partner. Kilo was a magnificent specimen, deep black and tan coat, powerful build, and eyes that held an intelligence far beyond a normal animal. He was a veteran, specializing in scent detection and personal protection. Kilo was Avery's silent anchor. His loyalty was a constant, untainted by human politics. Across the warehouse floor, the day's main event was in full swing, the CQB refresher course. Staff Sergeant Derek "Bull" Riley, a stocky, overly confident Marine with a booming voice and a perpetually smirk, led the drill. Riley, a man who saw military excellence only through the lens of brute force, glanced at Avery and scoffed loud enough for the echo to carry. "See, that's where the real fight is, Gunny Keller," Riley called out to his team, pointedly ignoring the stack of EOD certification docs on Avery's desk. "Some of us handle the fight, others organize the filing cabinets. That's just the natural order." Avery clenched her jaw, feeling the heavy weight of injustice. Suddenly, a piercing, high-pitched alarm sliced through the warehouse noise. The base-wide distress signal, usually reserved for natural disasters or immediate external threats. Avery automatically reached for an old, disconnected PRC IMO-117 radio she was meant to dismantle, plugging it into a repurposed terminal. This was a minor violation of protocol, a small act of defiance to access the classified base data feed directly. The screen flickered, showing the interior and exterior cameras of Pine Ridge Elementary School a few miles from the base, now completely locked down and silent. Supporting narrative track, Vance in command. In the windowless Joint Operations Center, JOC, the atmosphere instantly became tense. Major Elijah Eli Vance, the JOC's operations officer, stared at the same feeds Avery was accessing. Vance, a meticulous man of 45 with a thinning hairline and the kind of disciplined manner that came from decades of adhering strictly to the chain of command, was wearing a perfectly pressed service uniform. He was usually pragmatic and cool under pressure, but his composure fractured as he recognized the geometry of the situation. This was not a drill. Then he saw the familiar classroom, Clara's room. Clara Vance, his 9-year-old daughter, was a bright, curious girl with her father's serious eyes, now visibly huddled with her classmates near a makeshift barricade. Vance's heart plummeted from his chest into his stomach. "QRF deployment now!" Vance barked into his headset, the urgency in his voice overriding professional calm. "Negative, Major Vance." The order sliced back instantly from Colonel Hayes, the base commander, who had just rushed into the JOC. Colonel Hayes was an imposing figure in his late 50s, known for his unyielding adherence to procedural integrity and his obsession with minimizing administrative risk. His face was stern, his gaze like flint. Hayes slammed his hand down on the strategy table. "Protocol dictates containment and negotiation priority. We are following the hostage rescue doctrine. Do not escalate this, Major. Start the initial contact procedures. Get me the FBI liaison on the line. This will be a long process." Hayes's insistence on procedure was palpable, fueled by a fear of political fallout. Vance had to comply, but his mind raced. He noticed a figure on the external school camera feed, moving with chilling authority. A man known only as the Butcher. This man, whose real name was Qasim, was a transnational criminal boss wanted for heinous crimes, including human trafficking and political violence. Not a typical bank robber. He was wearing dark tactical gear, his face obscured by a ballistic mask, but his presence was unmistakable. Vance immediately pulled up a secure military channel and initiated a request to a trusted intelligence contact, sending a brief, cryptic message. Within seconds, a response flashed back. Intelligence indicated that the Butcher's recent high-value assets had been seized by U.S. federal agents. The school attack was not a ransom demand. It was a planned, targeted mass execution intended as a devastating public act of revenge against the U.S. government. Hayes's long process would only delay the inevitable slaughter. Despair washed over Vance, but he couldn't break rank. He was trapped. Back in the warehouse, Avery saw the Butcher on her illegally connected screen, the sight of the infamous warlord, a man. She had helped track but never captured, was all the confirmation she needed. The bureaucratic clock was their enemy, and the lives of those children, including Clara, were already forfeit under Hayes's slow, calculated doctrine. Avery glanced down at Kilo. The dog looked up, his tail giving one soft, steady thud against the concrete. Avery nodded, a sudden cold resolve hardening her gaze. She gently removed her EOD pin and tucked it into her pocket. "Looks like we're bypassing the filing cabinet, Kilo." The adrenaline coursed through Avery's veins, washing away the sting of Staff Sergeant Riley's scorn. She moved with a purpose that felt more authentic than any command briefing. In a secure, darkened corner of the warehouse, Avery quickly geared up. Her loadout was minimal and strictly off-book. She strapped a specialized EOD mini-kit containing lockpicks, a fiber-optic scope, and a frequency jammer to her back. Her choice of armament was a suppressed Heckler & Koch pistol, chosen for its quiet efficiency over sheer firepower. Avery then gently fitted a compact, encrypted tactical camera to Kilo's harness, securing it near his shoulder. The low-light camera would provide her only eyes and ears beyond her immediate sightline. "No noise, partner," Avery murmured, running a steady hand along Kilo's strong neck. Kilo responded with a soft whimper of acknowledgement, his powerful body already coiled with focus. Her next move was the most critical, bypassing the base perimeter without triggering alerts. Avery used her knowledge of base infrastructure, gained during months of admin duties, to access a rarely used maintenance tunnel leading to the post's outer fence. Here, she encountered the first hurdle, a rusted electronic gate lock. Avery pulled out her pick set, her fingers working with the practiced dexterity of a master jeweler. The lock wasn't designed for stealth. It was designed to break. After nearly 2 minutes of agonizingly quiet work in the dim light, the tumbler yielded with a barely audible click. Relief, swift and sharp, pierced her concentration. Once outside the wire, the pair followed a deep, dry, storm-drained trench that ran parallel to the highway leading to Pine Ridge Elementary. Avery navigated the forgotten route, relying on the mental maps she had obsessively studied during her downtimes. The air here was damp and smelled of decaying leaves and mud, a perfect cover for their scent. They reached the final section of the drain, a concrete tube large enough for a person to crawl through, leading directly beneath the school's maintenance shed. Avery knew this route was dangerous. It was an unmonitored flank, precisely the kind of route a competent hostile force might suspect and booby-trap. Kilo, crawling ahead of her, suddenly froze. He lowered his head, his ears twitching, and emitted a low, subtle huff, the signal for a nearby, electronic threat. Avery extended the fiber-optic scope and threaded it forward. She identified it. A simple but effective IR, infrared trip sensor, disguised beneath a clump of weeds, positioned to detect the heat signature of anything larger than a cat. Avery pulled back, her heart drumming against her ribs. She was wearing low-signature clothing, but Kilo's natural heat output was unmistakable. She carefully accessed the mini jammer from her kit, a tiny device she had built herself from salvaged parts. Using her specific EOD knowledge, she initiated a narrow-band frequency burst, aimed only at the specific wavelength the sensor used. The jammer's use was highly illegal and could be traced, but it offered the only silent solution. The red light on the sensor's receiver blinked and died. Avery and Kilo slipped past, Avery's mind calculating the milliseconds of delay the jammer might be causing. Supporting narrative track, Vance and covert support. Back in the JOC, Major Vance was running a tightrope act. He was physically supervising the official and deliberately slow negotiation process demanded by Colonel Hayes, while simultaneously monitoring Kilo's encrypted signal on a secondary, unauthorized display. Colonel Hayes, stone-faced and oblivious, was focused entirely on coordinating the FBI liaison, Agent Fiona Doyle. Doyle was a middle-aged woman with a weary, pragmatic air and a suit that looked rumpled from lack of sleep. Hayes valued her because she always advocated for non-violent resolution, fitting perfectly with his restrictive doctrine. Vance seized a moment when Hayes was distracted by Agent Doyle's phone call. He leaned over the radio console and whispered an instruction to tech specialist Ramos, a young, loyal Marine under his command. Ramos, I need you to initiate a Type B radio congestion drill near the base's western sector, reported as intermittent drone activity. Make it messy, make it last 30 minutes, now. Ramos, a man of few words but sharp technical skill, gave a silent nod and complied. The result was a temporary localized radio blind spot that would prevent any routine military patrol or surveillance drone from accidentally catching Avery on the ground. A major breach of security by Vance, but one that protected Avery's unauthorized entry. Vance then accessed the inventory logs. He spent 2 crucial minutes scrambling the paperwork for the obsolete radio equipment Avery was meant to be inventorying, creating a plausible accounting error that bought her vital operational time before her absence was officially noticed. He looked at Kilo's feed, which was now showing static-laced images of damp concrete and the telltale signs of the IR sensor bypass. Vance realized the depth of Avery's commitment and skill. He tried desperately to send a simple, coded text warning about the butcher's intent, the revenge plot. But the encryption layer was too thick, and Kilo's receiver wasn't set up for that frequency. As the JOC continued its slow, painful dance of formal procedure, Vance watched the green light on his unauthorized screen change from scanning to confirmed entry. He felt a wash of panic and exhilaration. His daughter's life, his career, and perhaps the future of military doctrine, now rested on the shoulders of the very Marine he had helped sideline. The damp crawlspace beneath the kitchen ended abruptly in a low metal vent. Avery and Kilo emerged silently into the maintenance closet, the sterile smell of disinfectant masking the earthy scent they carried. The sudden quiet of the school building, punctuated only by muffled, distant voices, was more unnerving than gunfire. Kilo led the way, low to the ground, his encrypted camera feeding Avery a fractured but vital view of the immediate corridor. They moved like ghosts along the primary hallway. Kilo's ears swiveled, locking on to the faint sounds of heavy breathing and shifting weight. He nudged Avery's hand, the alert for an unobserved human presence. Peeking around a corner, Avery saw him. Mercer, a low-ranking thug guarding the stairwell. Mercer was bulky, wearing ill-fitting tactical gear, and nervously checking his weapon, a clear sign of inexperience. Avery approached from behind with the grace of a jungle cat. Before Mercer could react, Avery had her forearm locked around his neck in a swift, controlled, non-lethal takedown chokehold. She applied pressure until his large body slumped unconscious to the floor. Avery stripped him of his two-way radio and listened in on the hostile frequency. The chatter was aggressive, confirming the butcher's control. A few steps later, Kilo stopped dead, pointing his nose towards the large double doors of the school library. Avery accessed the door lock with an electronic bypass tool, the mechanism clicking open without a sound. Inside, nearly 150 terrified children and teachers were crammed. Kilo moved through the crowd, not barking, but sniffing intensely. He stopped by a tall, elegant woman, Grace O'Connell. Grace, 35, was the third-grade teacher, known for her extraordinary calm and unwavering optimism, qualities that now kept panic at bay. She was heavily pregnant, 8 months along, a detail Avery noted with a sharp intake of breath, emphasizing the brutal logic of her immediate escape plan. Avery's gaze swept the room, finding Clara Vance near the back, clutching a worn teddy bear. Avery maintained eye contact for a flash of a second, then quickly pointed to a cabinet labeled Art Supplies, a non-verbal signal meaning stay low. Avery's job was not to comfort, but to secure their exit. Kilo's muzzle then nudged persistently at a brightly colored cardboard box near the librarian's desk. Avery recognized the distinct smell of RDX. It was the primary IED, camouflaged in a cheerful toy drive box. A tiny, military-grade detonator was visible, connected to a cheap smartphone set to receive a specific activation number. A chilling voice suddenly cut through Mercer's stolen radio. It was the butcher. The phone rings in 5 minutes. If I don't hear the command, the party ends. 5 minutes. Avery dropped to her knees. She used a small insulated probe to locate the precise wiring. The IED was booby-trapped. The slightest jolt or incorrect cut would trigger detonation. Avery didn't cut the wires. She bypassed the phone's signal entirely, using her EOD frequency jammer directly on the detonator's microcircuitry, creating an electrical feedback loop that rendered the phone signal inert. A masterful technique that only the most highly trained EOD specialists knew. As Avery worked, Kilo moved away from her, nudging the door shut with his snout, then walking over to Grace O'Connell. He gently lay down by her feet, positioning his body as a silent, warm shield for the pregnant teacher and the huddled children. It was a primal, profound gesture of loyalty and protection in the face of absolute terror. Supporting narrative track, Vance and the power grid trap. Back in the JOC, Major Vance was listening to the hostile frequency through a secret feed, a benefit of his advanced clearance. He heard the butcher's voice and then a quick coded exchange with a second terrorist that wasn't meant for the main command channel. If they try to cut the juice, the secondary detonator handles it. They think they're smart, they die smart. Vance's blood ran cold. He immediately understood. The bomb was rigged to detonate if the building's power grid was manually shut down. Cutting power was the first step in the official hostage rescue doctrine to disable security systems and communications. Colonel Hayes was currently finalizing the code to initiate the blackout. Vance stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly across the floor, drawing the attention of both Hayes and Agent Doyle. "Sir, Colonel Hayes, hold the command." Vance's voice, usually controlled, cracked with a desperate urgency that shocked the room into silence. "Major, I am 5 seconds from execution. Explain yourself," Hayes demanded, his eyes narrowed with lethal suspicion. Vance took a breath, the ultimate choice laid bare before him. He committed his professional life to this moment. "I have received unverified, non-sanctioned intelligence, highly reliable. The bomb is rigged to a secondary circuit. Any power cutoff will result in immediate detonation. It's a dead man's switch for the grid. Sir, you implement the protocol. You kill all 300 people inside, including my daughter, Clara Vance." The confession hung heavy in the air. Hayes's face, usually impervious, turned ash gray as the weight of mass casualty, and the political catastrophe it represented, hit him. "You have a counterplan, Major?" Hayes's voice was dangerously low, a test of command. "Yes, sir. We abort the blackout. We move to a full QRF deployment immediately. No more negotiation, based on the critical, time-sensitive intelligence that the threat is moving to execution." Vance essentially demanded that Hayes validate Avery's rogue mission. Hayes glared at Vance, weighing doctrine against conscience. The thought of being responsible for the mass death of school children, his own hand triggering the final explosion, was unbearable. He swallowed hard. "Agent Doyle, stand down the negotiation team. Ramos," Hayes shouted, using the name of Vance's subordinate in the other room. "Cancel all grid operations. Major Vance, you just committed to a very long court-martial, but you have your window. Mobilize QRF, now." The control room erupted into a controlled, furious panic as the command shifted from negotiation to immediate, violent action. The JOC's frantic mobilization gave Avery the window she desperately needed. She knew the QRF was coming from the front, a tactic the Butcher expected and was ready to counter. Avery had to be the spark that neutralized the defense nodes. She retrieved the confiscated two-way radio from the unconscious Mercer. Knowing the hostile frequency, Avery initiated a chaotic broadcast, blasting static and a distorted, pre-recorded audio loop of a dozen different voices shouting in Farsi. A manufactured radio riot, she intentionally directed the signal to emanate from the school gymnasium far from the main hall. "They're flanking the north wing. Move now." A panicked voice, Avery's own, masked electronically, screamed into the static. The diversion worked. Avery watched on Kilo's feed as the Butcher and his two remaining men, Rix and Talon, new characters, pulled back from the main hall entrance, sprinting toward the gym with aggressive suspicion. Rix, tall and thin, with the nervous energy of a heavy smoker, and Talon, wide and slow with a noticeable limp, were clearly the last line of defense. Avery and Kilo waited at the intersection near the principal's office, the ambush point. As the three men rounded the corner, Avery acted. She deployed a single flashbang grenade, a non-lethal tool carried in her EOD kit, normally used for distraction during bomb disposal, throwing it low. The deafening concussion disoriented Rix and Talon instantly. Kilo was launched, on Avery's verbal command. "Protect!" The dog didn't attack for the kill. Instead, he targeted Rix's weapon hand, latching on just long enough to disarm him while Avery moved. The Butcher, Kazim, despite the blast, recovered instantly. Showing the reflexes of a true veteran criminal, he raised his pistol. Avery, refusing to use lethal force unnecessarily, acted on pure muscle memory. She didn't fire. She used her pistol as a blunt instrument, executing a swift muzzle strike to Talon's temple, knocking him out cold. Then, she faced the Butcher. Knowing she needed him alive for legal consequence, she drew her survival knife, a non-standard, custom-fixed blade. It wasn't about killing, it was about control. Avery parried his first shot, closing the distance and driving the knife into the Butcher's shoulder, a non-fatal debilitating blow. The warlord screamed, dropping his weapon and collapsing, immobilized by the pain and surprise. The fight lasted less than 8 seconds. Avery quickly secured the Butcher and his men with zip ties, retrieving all their weapons. She rushed to the back stairwell, threw open the emergency door, and signaled the all-clear to Kilo's camera. Simultaneously, the main doors of Pine Ridge Elementary exploded inward. The QRF team, led by a determined but visibly nervous Captain Martinez, Avery's immediate superior, who previously dismissed her, flooded the main hall. The coordinated, controlled chaos was exactly what Vance had planned. Inside the library, the relief was overwhelming. Avery stood by the doorway as the first students were evacuated. Grace O'Connell, held steady by Kilo, was helped onto a stretcher by medics. She reached out and grasped Avery's hand, her eyes shining with silent gratitude. Avery nodded, her face unreadable. 0 friendly casualties. 301 lives saved. Supporting narrative track, Vance and the final verdict. Hours later, the sun was setting, casting long, judicial shadows across the command conference room. Avery stood rigidly at attention, her uniform stained with dirt and gunpowder, Kilo resting quietly at her heels. Colonel Hayes presided, his face pale and etched with the tension of the day. "Gunnery Sergeant Keller," Hayes began, his voice gravelly. "You launched without orders. You violated the primary hostage rescue doctrine. You engaged an enemy combatant at CQB distances without a support element. These are dismissible offenses." Major Vance, his eyes red from stress and lack of sleep, stepped forward from the council table. He was no longer the conflicted officer, but a determined advocate. "Colonel, I submit the full forensic analysis of the IED. Avery's immediate EOD action, performed solo, neutralized a bomb specifically designed to bypass the command's planned power cutoff procedure. Her actions were a surgical necessity. The doctrine failed, her procedure succeeded." Hayes looked at the overwhelming evidence. The confession of the butcher was already detailing his revenge plot. The fact that Vance, a man of procedure, was defending a breach of protocol spoke volumes. "Keller, you will receive an official written reprimand for unauthorized departure and engagement," Hayes decreed. Then a long pause. "However," Hayes continued, holding a small box, "your initiative and skill ensured the safe extraction of 301 civilians and the capture of a high-value threat. Effective today, Gunnery Sergeant, you are awarded the Silver Star for valor. Resolution and doctrine. The legal consequences for the terrorists were swift and absolute. The butcher, Kazim, Ricks, and Talon were found guilty of multiple counts of federal terrorism, mass murder conspiracy, and hostage-taking. The sentence delivered was life imprisonment without parole, ensuring they would serve their time in the absolute isolation of the Supermax facility, ADX Florence. Justice was served decisively. For Avery, the consequence was transformative. She was immediately reassigned and appointed head of the Gatekeeper Doctrine Development Team. Weeks later, Major Vance found Avery in her new clean office, the first time she'd ever had a window. "I was wrong about you, Avery," Vance said simply, extending his hand. "I mistook preparation for insubordination." "Sir," Avery replied, shaking his hand firmly, "I went outside the lane. That was on me. Now we redraw the lanes." The final scene. Avery stood before a class of the military's top trainees. Kilo sat at her feet. She held up her EOD pin and her Silver Star ribbon. "Technology is a promise, not a plan. The plan is you," she stated, her voice firm, now carrying the weight of command. "Read the ground, master your craft. When the map stops, you draw the next line." And that is the truth woven through the story of Gunnery Sergeant Avery Keller, Kalo, and the 300 innocent lives saved at Pine Ridge Elementary. It's a story of unwritten doctrine, where one person's commitment to skill and readiness surpassed the rigidity of the rules. But beyond the brass and the badges, beyond the training that made Avery's hands steady, there is a deeper truth, a quiet echo of grace. Avery's success wasn't just precision. It was a narrow, perfect alignment of chance, timing, and dedication that defied statistical probability. In the chaos of that day, with a bomb about to detonate and command paralyzed, that moment of perfect clarity, the strength to act, the knowledge to disarm, the resilience of that tiny storm drain felt like a direct intervention. It felt like a small, fierce miracle orchestrated by the divine. A reminder that God often chooses the prepared heart and the humble servant to perform the work that seems impossible. In our own lives, we may not face terrorists or defuse bombs, but we all face moments when our personal doctrine fails and we must rely on something greater. We face moments where courage and skill, the gifts we are given, are needed to protect our family, to help a struggling neighbor, or simply to stand up for what is right. May this story serve as a reminder. Prepare your heart, sharpen your gifts, and be ready to draw the next line when the map stops. For when preparation meets faith, that is where ordinary people become instruments of extraordinary saving grace. Thank you for watching this story of courage and redemption. If this message resonated with you, if you believe in the power of a single person to make a difference, please share this story with someone who needs encouragement. Comment below and tell us what you believe is the unwritten doctrine in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a tale of valor and hope. May God bless you and keep you safe always.